So Marvel Rivals has finally released and you want to know if it's any good? Well, I'd like to think I'm pretty qualified for the job. I've got too many hours in Overwatch and have tried and followed almost every hero shooter under the sun. I've seen the popular ones succeed and the less fortunate ones fail. I don't know what this one will do, but I can sure as hell tell you if you should play it or not. In this video, I'll be going over the good, the bad, and the unknown. So strap in, grab a bag of carrots, and let's go over the good stuff first. Right, let's hit it off with the obvious one first. Everything about the character roster is extremely impressive. From the huge amounts of them available at launch, to the variety of well-designed hero kits, and the way that they included heavy hitters that everyone loves, like Hulk and Iron Man, but also deeper cuts as well, like Cloak and Dagger, and my goat Jeff. 33 heroes is a staggering number of heroes to release with. That number immediately puts Rivals in contention with other shooters like Overwatch with 41 and Valorant with 24. This really helps the game to feel fresh. If you get bored of one character, there is already a huge roster for you to pick another one from. It sets the game up with a really strong set of legs and means that there is more than likely at least a few characters that you'll enjoy. Now obviously a lot of people are going to compare hero kits to Overwatch in particular, but there are two key points about this topic that you need to consider before playing. Firstly, Overwatch is successful for a reason. There are some abilities that cross over between games and are used very similarly, but this crossover exists because these abilities are proven and successful and aren't trademarked to one game in particular. Almost every hero-based multiplayer game, which I am not limiting to shooters by the way, have abilities which can be seen as very similar and characters who could be considered clones of each other. We've seen this story time and time again where clips discussing this idea go viral, but if every game is copying each other, then things like the big shield character, the bow character, the one who can go invisible, all become fundamental genre design. And if these universal kits and abilities are carried out in an engaging way, like they are in this game, then I don't think they should be used as a negative talking point. The idea that people are circulating that this game is a clone, an Overwatch clone in particular, is just shallow and unfounded. Because instead, I think we should be applauding Marvel Rivals for where it puts its own spin on these fundamentals, where it builds on these hero foundations, and where it successfully deviates from them. The characters in Marvel Rivals are built in such a way that, yes, they appeal to hero shooter players, and the characters who don't push the mold are successful in their own right, but many of the characters in this game are also built in a way that pushes away from that format. Characters like Magic and Iron Man feel like they completely break that mold that many people have pushed this game into. Iron Man's main gimmick is that he can fly infinitely and seamlessly, which to my knowledge has never been done before in a game like this, so with him you unlock a whole new way to play, bombarding everyone from the sky, which completely changes the mindset you have to have with regards to spacing, how and where to take cover, and how your opponents might react to your presence. In other games previous, the only way for fights to take place on the y-axis like this was with use of map elevation, and obviously other characters can move higher up in the map here too, but Iron Man unlocks an even higher plane of the map and by extension a new way of thinking about fights for both teams, something which feels alien and exciting. Storm also has to consider this because she can fly as well, and she has to think about everything in a different way again in terms of how she can support the team with speed and damage boosts, which gives me hope that the developers will add even more flying characters with different playstyles, because it is rare that a game like this adds a whole new factor to team fights in a way as simple yet innovative as this. Like I said before, Magic and by extension all melee characters make you approach the game totally differently too. Magic especially plays almost like a MOBA character with her quick dashes, maneuverability and combos. She plays on a very 2D plane, which again makes space in this game feel very different. There are a surprising amount of melee characters, which is obviously a stark contrast to any hero shooters we've experienced before. I could go on about how this adds even another layer to the genre, unheard of before, but I think you get it. All of this is to say that Marvel Rivals doesn't feel like a hero shooter, but more like a new thing, a hero brawler, which is the best case scenario for this game. Because it's not restricted in what it can do in terms of hero design, every single character feels so much more monumental, more individual and more creative, so I'm gonna say it, you really feel like a superhero. I've been caught out so many times with how I just don't feel like I'm playing a shooter. It feels like its own thing, even though on paper it doesn't look like it would stand out as much as it does. If you combine that with the fact that we're playing as characters that most of us have come to know and love, it creates this connection, a feeling that each character is important, not just because the developers have made an effort to make sure loads of them play in a way that pushes the genre forward, but also because you can relate a pre-existing love for these characters to them, and each one feels like a substantial reincarnation of each hero. So many of these hero kits aren't possible in other games. They play like you would imagine they would, exactly like you would, and it feels special simply to be playing them at all. There are two sides to why it feels so good to play these characters. Not only are you playing icons, but those icons are pushing the format in creative ways because they're allowed to be themselves. Being a free free-to-play game, we obviously have to address the monetization here too. I'd say Marvel Rivals does this pretty well though. Largely, the pricing of skins is the same as any other game. You purchase a special currency with real money, which you can then spend on skins in the shop. The game hasn't been out for long enough to properly test how accomplishable getting this currency is, but from here it seems to be about on par with everything else on the market. Battle Pass prices are similar too. At launch we're in officially what's called Season 0, and since it's designed to be a much shorter season, the Battle Pass is very short, but only costs half the price you would expect. Once it returns to normal though, I do think that these passes are a worthwhile purchase. Skins feel very substantial in this game, partly because it's third person and you can actually see what you're wearing, but also because there is an inherent excitement in unlocking looks since we're talking about characters from a massive IP, but that's just my take. Microtransactions are not invasive, not scandalous, and since you can complete the battle pass you bought after the season 4 is over, I do think this game has a few legs up on other free-to-play games in terms of value for money. A lot of credit should go to the technical state of this game too. Everyone knew this would be massive on release, but the developers were very prepared for this. No queue times to get into the game, complete stability when playing it. I didn't crash once, and I haven't seen anyone online who had a bad experience with this either. The whole service has been surprisingly reliable, which meant that everyone was in the game and not crashing at the same time, which then meant that, I'm not even kidding, queue times for actual games basically don't exist, even to this day. I could swear to you, about 50% of the time when I press the play button, I find a game on the next frame. Obviously this isn't a factor to commend if we're talking about the long-term viability of the game, but where so many games failed in this aspect, Marvel Rivals was prepared. It does help that when you're playing, the game looks beautiful from fidelity to art style. I gotta admit, I wasn't totally hooked from the trailers. The look didn't seem to impress me a whole lot, but the game totally shocked me once I got in. Everything looks so sleek and pretty, animations are gorgeous, and character models and maps just look like so good. This is the aspect of the game that I can't really get my thoughts out on very well, because it would just be me regurgitating the same hyperbolic over and over again, but I am simply astounded by how much I enjoy looking at this game and how well everything is designed visually. They have clearly landed on a successful look for the game. It works so well, and like, this has never happened before, right? But I am so excited to see new maps and characters in the game. Not actually to play them, screw that, but just to look at them. Even now, I am understating how the look and the feel of the game excites me. It's something that grows on you rapidly over time. It's like Stockholm Syndrome. Every time I come back, I like it more and more. So if you're apprehensive about anything to do with how it looks, be that the art style or the third person perspective, I would really advise you to try it and make your mind up over a few days. Okay, this is my last point before we move on to the bad stuff. So while I'm on the topic of maps, I need to talk about how they work really well in the context of how the game reimagines the hero shooter genre. The maps are very accomplished in the way that they are made to allow all heroes in the game to explore their kits. With the crazy amount of movement in the game, horizontally and vertically, there is a lot to consider when making a map, because if they'd made them like another hero shooter, lots of characters in the roster would feel quite restrictive. This is not true for all areas of the maps. Obviously, there are different parts where picks may feel more viable or unviable, but from where I'm standing, most of the time, it's not the map that would make you swap heroes if you're not doing very well, but the enemy team composition. Largely, I felt the mantra of X is bad on this map was gone, because these areas you fight in have been forcibly made to accommodate all types of fighting styles due to the diverse array of them in the game. So instead, swapping heroes is a dance with how the enemy team use their heroes to occupy the space. It's much less rigid than other games, because you can probably find a way to make any character work on any map, which yes, is possible in other games, especially at a lower level of play, but I didn't get the sense that I was being disadvantaged by picking a certain character, because I had the freedom to play the character I want with the space they need in most areas of the game, the accommodation of which is really impressive. Alright, let's talk about the bads. I want to preface this bit by saying that this is a very new game, so there is an infinite number of nitpicks that people could discuss, the majority of which I see being improved and changed throughout the game's lifespan, so I'm only going to talk about the core issues I personally have with it, because this is the stuff that matters more, the stuff that I would ideally see tweaked whenever the developers can. While I'm fresh off talking about maps, I will quickly mention there isn't a massive variety just yet. I realise this point blurs the lines between a nitpick and a core issue, because it certainly will improve, but with the huge cast of characters keeping the game feeling really fresh on launch, that fact is hindered a little when you're always playing the same small little rotation of maps. I need to stress that this isn't a major problem though. If the developers had the resources to add more maps and launched, then they would have done it. Like, it's totally okay, just something I had to add for anyone coming to the game right now to keep in mind, because there is a chance that this may bug you a little. The future of maps is really bright because of the points I mentioned before, so I only have high hopes for this moving forward. With that out of the way, we do need to have a conversation about death. Landing a kill and what happens after can at times feel very disjointed and unsatisfying. The first area of concern I have with regards to this is that on a lot of points, this is not a small number by the way, the spawn point of the enemy team feels like it's much too close to the main fight. The distance varies of course, and sometimes it feels like there is enough space, but it gets frustrating because so many of the characters can move extremely fast. I can't count the number of times where I've killed, say, a Venom. I'm relieved, we stopped the difficult to kill tank, I can focus on other things now, and then I see him again in the fight in what feels like no time at all. I don't mind fighting a lot, it's fun always having something to shoot at, but these enemies come back so fast that it often feels like killing them doesn't achieve a whole lot. When the reprieve is so short, when the time you have to push the payload a bit further in between kills is so short, I don't feel like I've done anything except add a 1 to my kill count on the scoreboard. Now this only becomes a massive problem when you account for the other two large facts. Fighting is uncoordinated and sporadic because the game is so fresh, and healing is also extremely strong. With fights rarely having any meaningful team play, mostly because the game is so new and we're all learning together, everyone on both teams dies at extremely disjointed times. People will randomly die before fights even start, which I'm not hating on them for, like pop off, I don't know what I'm doing either. But with random kills happening so sporadically across the match, and with such contrasting movement capabilities when returning from spawn, there is no feeling of, alright, a fight is starting, let me focus, because often when playing a map, you just have to accept that there will be a constant fight happening through the whole round. People, including me, run in, get a few kills, maybe die, maybe stay, but there is very little time to reset, to gather yourself, because you know you're needed at all times. Like all things, the severity of this contrasts. I've had actual fights with an actual end, like mythology type shit, but I've also had 5-minute dogfights on a point before, which some people may enjoy. I'm happy with that, but even when I'm at my best and can kill multiple people at a time, it's hard to feel accomplished in killing someone sometimes. On many occasions, I don't pay attention to how well the objective is doing because it feels like an afterthought. Killing and staying on top of everything takes up so much mental space that I can only factor it into what's happening around me when we've captured the point and the round is over, or when we've reached a new checkpoint with the payload and the map looks different. So at that point, it feels a lot more like a team deathmatch, and there just happens to be a payload in between us. This thought is really felt with all the different character playstyles. I have to pay attention to constantly returning frontline behemoths, any annoying flankers, any attacks from the sky, and supporting my teammates, so the focus of the game mode is often lost on me. I do think this will get better with time. As people grow more accustomed to the game and become more singular as a team, it's just a style of playing that can sometimes wear me thin. On top of this, it feels like the healing output from the strategist characters is also a bit overtuned. This is a funny one to talk about because the amount of players who don't care about healing at all is quite high at the moment because it's so exciting to do damage in a new game. That makes total sense, but when you do have people on a team who like to focus on healing, which is only going to increase over time, it might become a bit of a problem. Burst healing heals a huge amount of health, and sustained healing lasts for a criminal amount of time. Stuff like Jeff's water and Loki's AoE healing can last what feels like years, and it's very difficult to take someone out when there is someone on the other side who is prioritizing healing. I do honestly think this will be a problem as the game gets older and people understand how to properly utilize the potential of these characters. The numbers that they put out makes it extremely difficult to land a kill, and unfortunately I can't probably test and tell you how viable it is to target the support instead, because right now with the chaos of team play there are many cases where support is left entirely on their own and can be picked off easily, but there are also times when they're surrounded by an accidental hive mind and it would be easier to organize a bank heist than to coordinate your team to clamp down on their backline. So in effect, right now it feels like the difficulty of landing a kill varies with the quantity and quality of their supports, and even when it does happen, it doesn't feel rewarding enough because fights are often difficult to entirely close out unless someone lands a huge multi-kill ultimate. That's pretty much how most of them will end, which feels amazing if you're on the right side of it, I won't lie. And this problem doesn't feel like a deal breaker because I do love fighting and navigating my way through a fight, but I do think there's something to be said about spawn distances and wild contrasts in how easy it is to land kills in each match. If you want to simplify everything and call this a byproduct of how new the game is and how team play doesn't exist very often just yet, then that is totally fine by me, but I do think there are areas worth looking into here. But that's my only critique. I truly love everything about the rest of this package. One more thing though that I would like to see is in the future I would really love for damage and healing numbers for the whole team to be added to the scoreboard so you can properly gauge who is having an impact and who isn't. I realise this will increase toxicity, but I do think they're valuable numbers to have on hand, particularly to evaluate how well you're doing against everyone else. I think these numbers would really help improve the quality of games and even just to help you feel great about doing great, because right now all we have is the KD to compare people to, which is cool and all, but I think if these numbers got added I would feel even more interested in the moment-to-moment action. Aside from that though, I've got nothing else that I would see changed, so let's move on to the questions I have about the future of this game. Right, okay, time for the big one. question. Is role queue the right way forward? Would having set restrictions of 2 tanks, 2 damage and 2 support heroes improve the game? In a competitive, high level scenario, sure, probably, but what about the comps that don't force 2-2-2? There's no way to utilise them unless you don't have role lock and risk the team going 60 PS. I don't have a definitive answer for you just yet, but what I can tell you is that it feels good to not have our creativity limited and have role lock on as of right now. But for the future, I couldn't tell you, but while the game is chaos, I really do think it should be embraced. It really leans into the idea that you're just 12 crazy powerful superheroes slugging in and out against each other, and in my experience, teams often have a fair split of roles anyway. I've only had a few games with like 5 duelists in it. Most of the time we have 1 to 2 of each role, and I'm not in a hurry to restrict play when it's so fun right now. We will have to see what happens with this in the future, but as of right now, I really don't know the right way forward. I'm also asking, how long will the novelty of this game last? It's a dream for so many people to be fully playing all these characters, and over time, the feeling that you're actually these characters may wear off, and they could feel more like binary hero shooter characters once the game starts getting more competitive. I personally don't see this happening for me, but it's something to consider. It's such an exciting game for everyone right now, and I really hope that the developers can keep it fresh for years to come. I'm very interested to see how they do this. We have no idea how much content they will be adding every 3 months, which is how long they plan on running each season. Will there be a new character and a new map? Will there be multiple characters? It's a tricky one to weave, because with the Marvel IP, it will be extremely hard to satisfy the players in terms of character release frequency, because it's so exciting to imagine all the characters that they could bring to this game, and we want that to happen as soon as possible. There is a lot of inherent anticipation with this, but they will never be able to add everyone because there are literally hundreds of people who would feel monumental and awesome. So it's interesting to imagine the amount of resources they have and how much they can add with each update. In the present moment though, I would heartily recommend this game to lovers of the genre who can experience how fresh and innovative this game feels. I would also recommend it to anyone who's tired of hero shooters for the same reason, and anyone who just enjoys Marvel because each character feels special, and so does this game. Here's to hoping that this one can succeed where so many other live services couldn't.